Welcome to another 21 Hats Dashboard. I'm Lauren Feldman, and I'm here with John Arensmeyer, who is founder and CEO of Small Business Majority, an advocacy group for businesses and entrepreneurs. Welcome back, John.
Good to be here, Lauren.
Great to have you. You're in D.C., you're following what's going on. There's been a lot going on. Let's dive right into the Inflation Reduction Act. Your organization has been supporting it. Why?
Sure. Well, there's a lot in here that's good for small business. I'm going to focus particularly on the healthcare provisions. A majority of participants in the marketplaces and the exchanges are small business owners, employees, and self-employed people. And we're very thrilled to see that the premium subsidies are going to remain in place for at least another 2 years. That takes off the table some pretty serious increases in healthcare that might have happened. And also, we've been advocating to reduce prescription drug prices for years, and they've finally taken the first step in the bill by allowing for the government to negotiate Medicare prices with drug companies. So that's huge.
So those things kind of help small businesses by kind of indirectly by helping their employees primarily, correct?
Right.
Got it.
And then
how about go ahead.
No, go on. Well, I mean, the people are talking about the tax provisions. And again, we have a very unequal tax code where big businesses really are able to legally avoid lots of taxes. And the fact that there's going to be a requirement that businesses with over $1 billion in profits pay taxes on at least 50% in taxes on their book income is a way of sort of leveling the playing field and bringing more revenue in, and certainly not at expense of small business. And then there's, of course, the increased tax enforcement, which is really going to be targeted to large businesses and very wealthy. Even the Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen, has said that not going to use any of that to target businesses, people with incomes under $400,000, which is 97% of the business ownership out there. And then there's the clean energy, which, small businesses are a huge part of a sustainable clean energy economy moving forward, and substantial investment and tax considerations to promote a clean energy economy is going to really boost domestic small businesses who play a big role in our clean energy economy going forward, and not to mention the environmental benefits.
What are you referring to? Is that, it targets electric vehicles, it targets, fuel pumps and things like that. You're talking about small businesses that are part of the supply chain to create those products?
Yeah, the electric vehicle tax credit, investments in clean energy manufacturing. There are small businesses up and down the line in the supply chain in all of our clean energy industries. So this is going to benefit them.
The bill does have a lot of critics. No Republicans voted for it. One of the things I saw was Senator Grassley on Twitter warning that IRS agents with AR-15s are going to be coming and knocking on the doors of business owners. I guess he was referring to the fact that there are going to be 80,000 more employees at the IRS to help the IRS do a better job of going after tax cheats. Is there any reason why business owners should be concerned about that?
Well, the IRS is significantly underfunded, and a lot of taxes aren't being collected, and the majority of those taxes are, corporate taxes or, taxes on the very wealthy. And these aren't necessarily people or corporations that are overt criminals. They may be pushing the envelope, and it's going to require an additional workforce of IRS agents to take a look and see, is this proper or is it not? I mean, I'm not going to respond to the AR-15 comment. I mean, this is hyperbole, and we're in a pretty intense, polarized political environment now. So I'll let that one stand.
I hear you. I think to try to make sense of what he is saying, the best face you could put on that argument is that if there's increased enforcement, there may be businesses that are more businesses will be forced to go through an audit, and that can be a painful process, even if you're not doing anything wrong. Is that a concern?
I mean, nobody likes to go through an audit, but it's hard to argue that businesses should be concerned if there's going to be enforcement of tax laws and that they need to be looked at. I do not see anything in this legislation or anything that Secretary Yeller or anyone else has said that indicates this is going to be targeting very small businesses. It's absolutely not going to be targeting the 97% of business owners that have income under $400,000, $500,000 for married filing jointly. So it's not a significant concern for the vast majority of small businesses. And it's, the IRS is woefully understaffed. There's been all sorts of studies showing that, billions of dollars aren't being collected. And as I said, it's not just overt criminals. These are people attempting to do things perhaps that need to be looked at.
How about the electric vehicle stuff? There's been some criticism there suggesting that this is not going to have the immediate impact it might because it forces the manufacturers of electric vehicles to change their supply chains and make more stuff in America as opposed to overseas. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I think a lot of what is in the clean energy portion of this legislation is the benefits will be over time. We're not going to see immediate benefits this year. That's absolutely correct. But I do think that over time, look, the car companies in this case are already trending in this direction, and this gives them a boost. This gives them a signal that, hey, you already have started to move your manufacturing much more towards sustainable and ultimately electric vehicles, and we're telling you that's the way to go, and there are going to be tax benefits to doing that, and there's going to be increased investment in those industries. So yeah, we're going to see a trend over time, and to the extent that we get more of this work done, more of this manufacturing in the United States, that's going to benefit a greater number of U.S. businesses of all sizes.
It's been called the Inflation Reduction Act. Do you think it will reduce inflation?
I think we'll see an impact over time. As I said, I don't want people to expect this legislation alone is going to cause inflation to drop. Inflation is a function of a lot of different issues, really mostly related to dislocations coming off of the pandemic. But I do think over time it will help to stabilize our economy. A large part of what's going on with inflation is just a lot of uncertainty. People not having the right amount of inventory, not being prepared to have enough people working. The whole system got thrown out of whack by the pandemic. So this will help to settle things down, but in and of itself, it's not going to cause inflation to plummet overnight.
My sense of the small business majority, and I've been to some of your events, is that you represent a very broad swath, a very diverse group of business owners. Did you get any pushback from Republican members of your organization who did not think you should be supporting this?
Very little. We were able to secure a sign-on of 260 small businesses in a matter of 2 days to sign on to this. And we had a few interesting comments that came back in that process, I have to say. But it was very, very small number. We obviously welcome opinions from all sides, and we're always prepared to learn and listen to people's concerns. Our sense was that the opinions were, being driven by some of the partisanship that's infusing everything. But sure, I mean, nothing's ever 100%, but by and large, our businesses in our network tend to be smaller, tend to be more skewed toward business owners of color and women in under-resourced areas. They're very pleased about this.
As you said, very few things are get it right 100%. Are there any criticisms that you've heard that rang true to you that did give you concern? Is there anything that you would like to be different?
There really wasn't any concern about the legislation itself. I mean, to your point earlier, I'm sure there are some businesses that may be concerned about increased IRS enforcement. We didn't hear a lot of that, but that would be a reasonable thing to be concerned about. Quite frankly, and I really don't want to focus on what's not in here, But, there's a lot more that we can do, and hopefully we'll be able to do in terms of childcare and paid family leave. And we're hearing a lot of support for that. So again, I don't want to focus on what's not in here because there's a lot in here that's really good. But I would say the biggest comments that are, I wouldn't call them negative, but are just like, hey, we can do better, are along those lines, and not so much criticizing what's in here.
So let's move on to a couple of other topics. This is such an unusual economic time. Neither you nor I is an economist, but I'm curious what you're hearing from your organization. We're at this moment where there's been a lot of talk about recession looming, and there certainly are red flags out there. We also have this incredibly, dramatic growth in jobs, more than 500,000 in July. I guess the first question I ask is, do you think the labor shortage is ending, over, still going on?
Yeah, look, let me first of all say there's a lot of uncertainty out there. And quite frankly, we just came out of the field with a survey. We're going to be releasing the results, which showed actually a decrease in optimism from 6 months ago. And there's definitely concern about inflation, concern about a possible recession. To your point, workforce is a huge component of this. It is the frustration across so many industries and not being able to access a workforce that is needed right now. That is a big concern.
And are they calling for something to be done about it? Is there a sense that something should happen?
Well, I think there are a number of things that we can do. I think that I mentioned childcare, for example. We're hearing a lot on the issue of childcare, and the lack of affordable childcare is really impeding the ability of many caregivers, mostly women, to get back into the workforce. And on top of that, most of the childcare providers are small businesses, almost all run by women, and many run by women of color and immigrants. So childcare, we're hearing a lot, and that, if we could get to the heart of that, I think we could really solve things. Obviously, the healthcare stuff we talked about is going to be helpful. We'd love to see more attention being paid to paid leave. So I think things that are necessary to bolster a workforce are essential. But there are a couple other things we can be doing here. It's absolutely crazy that we have a more restrictive immigration system when immigrants provide huge amounts of the workforce in a lot of industries, hospitality, construction, and we're hearing in those industries just tremendous lack of support. And the last thing we should be doing is restricting immigration. Obviously, we need to have a secure border, but we've really created a situation where there are far fewer immigrants available for many of these jobs than there were. The other thing we can be doing is boosting justice-impacted second chance hiring. There are large numbers of people out there who are looking for second chance jobs. It's something we're going to be getting more and more involved in, and it's just sitting there. So those are two things we can be doing immediately to boost our workforce.
As far as immigration, would it take a comprehensive agreement on immigration to solve that problem? Or do you think there's smaller steps that might happen more quickly than that?
Well, look, a comprehensive agreement would be the best. It's really unfortunate that we actually had a bipartisan legislation in the Senate, 6-7 years ago, that never got a hearing in the House. And at one point in time, this really was a bipartisan issue. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce supports a more expanded immigration. But that said, the one thing I didn't mention before is DACA, the Dreamers. These are people who are essentially American. They've been in this country almost their entire lives. Having restrictions on their ability and creating uncertainty in their lives is not helpful to boosting entrepreneurship, boosting the workforce of the future. There are definitely things we can do with our border policy to ensure that we don't have people coming in who are going going to, who may be criminals or maybe will disrupt things. But at the same time, that's led to reductions in legal immigration. That's led to reductions in the H-1B program, H-2B program. So there are a lot of things we can be doing short of a comprehensive solution. Obviously, a comprehensive solution is what we really should be shooting for in the long run.
I also wanted to ask you about another piece of legislation that's kind of been overshadowed by the Inflation Reduction Act, but we've also recently passed the CHIPS Act, which encourages the manufacture of computer chips in this country. Does that have a potential impact for small businesses?
Well, I think what we saw up and down the line were the breakdowns in the supply chain, and a lot of that did have to do with dependence on foreign sources. We think that free trade is a great thing, but I think we learned in the pandemic that if you allow yourself to depend too heavily on other countries for key supplies, such as chips in this case, you're putting yourself behind the eight ball. So yes, that is huge, and the ability to bolster a domestic manufacturing base of chips is going to be essential. Obviously, the industry itself will employ more Americans and will allow more small businesses in the supply chain to participate, but also industries like the auto industry that has been really hampered not having the right kind of chips, and then that's had a ripple effect on all the suppliers in the auto industry. Yes, so that is huge. It's obviously a national security concern, but it's definitely a domestic economic concern that is going to have a big benefit for small businesses.
John, we've covered a lot of ground here. Is there anything else you'd like to see happening at this point that would be useful to?
Two quick things. We haven't touched on capital, and there continues to be a need to, as we come down from all of the pandemic programs, there needs to be a continued focus on ensuring that not only capital but technical assistance gets to the most under-resourced businesses to provide them with capital, kind of get beyond some of the traditional restrictions on capital that have left a lot of them on the side, and to give them more access to education and technical assistance. We're very excited about the State Small Business Credit Initiative, the SSBCI, that is going to enable states to get $10 billion out to mostly under-resourced small businesses, and a $500 million of that is directly tied to providing technical assistance. So we're very excited about that. The other thing I just want to mention briefly is there's been a real uptake in a focus, as you know, on antitrust and fair competition, which is actually, again, a bipartisan issue. And small businesses have been, antitrust has been something people haven't focused on it very much at all in the last 40 years. And small businesses are bearing the brunt of sort of unequal relationships with large businesses, not just tech, although that's a big part of it, but in franchise relationships, in other contractual relationships, and across the board. And we're very pleased to see that there's an uptick in concern about this, and we think small businesses need to be at the table making the case for why we need to enforce some of these laws and maybe pass some new laws to deal with that.
Is that what it's going to take? Do you think legislation is required, or are you referring to litigation? What's going to move the needle?
All of the above. We know there's pending legislation. I know there's gotten some play. The Klobuchar-Grassley bill on self-preferencing in the tech industry. But also this is like the Robinson-Patman Act that's been on the books for decades that really needs to be enforced by the FTC and the Justice Department, price discrimination. And then there's an opportunity, for additional private action. So, and the states are, by the way, taking action in this. New York is trying to get a fairly substantial antitrust law passed. So, small business really gets harmed by these unequal economic relationships. And to answer your question, it's really across the board. New legislation, enforcement of existing legislation, and a little more opportunity for private rights of action.
Going back to your concern about getting capital to small businesses, do you think the state small business credit initiative will be sufficient, or are you looking for other types of action there to help smaller businesses?
Well, I think it's a really good start, and it's also going to set a tone for perhaps states on their own, or even for the federal government to follow up with similar programs. It's an opportunity to get the capital processed through organizations like CDFI's Community Development Finance Institutions to give a real boost to technical assistance providers in the states who are helping under-resourced businesses. And we think it's a model for how we can go to get capital to businesses that have traditionally been undercapitalized.
Although it does make it a little bit more complicated, because it's not like a business just goes to the SBA to learn more about it. The funds are distributed state by state, if I'm not mistaken, which means you have to look for organizations in your own state. It makes it a little bit more complicated for businesses to figure out where to turn. Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct, and we're spending a lot of time reaching out in the states, to educate small businesses about where to go, and working with partners in the states to do that. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. But this program existed under the Obama administration, and it was very successful. It was set up coming out of the Great Recession, and the states really stepped up, and this is just the states, it's the tribal entities as well, stepped up. I think there's 56 different entities that are playing a role in this. It's also revitalized the Minority Business Development Agency under the Department of Commerce. And so what it's doing is it's activating a lot of different groups out there nationally and in the states to take a more affirmative role. So we think it's a model, and no, it's not everything. We have a long way to go, but this is a big step forward.
You're right. It did exist before. What changed is it got the big infusion of funding, which happened a year ago, I guess, or more than a year ago now, maybe a year and a half with the pandemic legislation. It's taken a long time for that money to get distributed. Is there a problem with that, or do you know if the money's flowing?
The money is flowing. It is slow, and a little slower perhaps than we would have ideally liked, but it is flowing. It wasn't all going to be distributed immediately. For the $10 billion, there are 3 different tranches and over a course of the next few years. So, and then the Treasury Department has taken time looking at all the applications from the states and the tribal entities, and is moving, fairly expeditiously. So it is underway, and, we'd always love to see stuff happen faster than it does, but they've been doing a pretty good job getting this done and taking care of things.
All right. That's a great overview. John Arensmeyer is founder and CEO of Small Business Majority and Our Man in Washington. John, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Lauren. Great to chat with you.
I appreciate it. Have a great week, everybody.